Picture a revolutionary pan-Indian power that literally rose from a spark of local resistance to challenge the mighty Mughal Empire. We're talking about a force that started small, exploded into a massive continent-spanning empire, built awe-inspiring administrative networks, and ultimately became the chief rival of the British in India. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the incredible rise, reign, and legacy of the Maratha Empire. Listen to this warning from way back in 1715, written by a Maratha finance minister regarding European colonizers. They are fully intent on entering this land. Navy and gunpowder are their chief weapons. Their traffic should be controlled. Now that instantly sets a tone of high geopolitical tension, doesn't it? It also highlights the immense, almost startling foresight of Maratha leaders. They completely understood the maritime threat of foreign powers decades before full-blown British colonization even took hold. Okay, let's dive into this epic historical journey. First, we'll cover the birth of Swarajya, then look at their guerrillas, forts, and fleets. After that, we'll track the expansion of the empire, explore how they ran such a massive state, and wrap up with their lasting cultural legacy. Section 1. The birth of Swarajya, the 17th century Deccan. So, to really understand the Marathas, we have to set the scene in the 17th century Deccan Plateau. This is in present-day Maharashtra. At the time, this whole region was being torn apart by the constant infighting of the Deccan sultanates, which created severe everyday hardship for the common people. But right in the middle of all that chaos, a profound cultural shift called the Bhakti movement took root. Basically, this was a spiritual movement emphasizing personal devotion to the divine over strict external rituals. And crucially, it was led by local saints, people like Tukaram and Ram Das, who composed poetry and songs in Marathi, the language of the masses. You know, this wasn't just about religion. This cultural movement actually laid a solid, unifying foundation for the Maratha people to later organize themselves into a formidable political power. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this cultural unification totally paved the way for the rapid ascent of their most legendary figure. Born in 1630, Shivaji didn't exactly start out with massive, overwhelming armies. Actually, he began his military campaigns at just 16 years old. He did this by cleverly capturing neglected, unoccupied forts to consolidate his hold over the Pune region. Fast forward to 1674, and this teenager who started by seizing forgotten hilltop forts was formally crowned as Chhatrapati, or sovereign king, at the grand mountain fortress of Raigad. Now we have to talk about Swarajya. Think of Swarajya as a revolutionary early declaration of total political, economic, and cultural independence. You see, Shivaji wasn't just conquering land for the sake of power. He was fighting for a profound, value-driven vision of self-rule. He genuinely cared for his civilians. He issued strict instructions to his officials, absolutely forbidding them to mistreat subjects or forcefully grab even a single blade of grass from them. That's a huge shift from how things were typically run back then. Section 2. Guerrillas, forts, and fleets. Military genius. So how exactly did a localized force take down established, massive empires like the Bijapur Sultanate and the Mughals? Honestly, with sheer military genius, an intimate understanding of their rugged terrain, and incredibly clever weapons like the Wagnach or Tiger's Claw. Imagine this highly cinematic scene. Facing the wrath of the massive Bijapur Sultanate, Shivaji agreed to a one-on-one meeting with their veteran general, Afzal Khan, at the foot of a fort surrounded by thick forest. Shivaji used this small, highly concealable weapon to defeat the towering general in close combat, while his hidden forces utilized classic guerrilla tactics to completely rout the much larger Sultanate army. It was brilliant. Then, you have the conflict with the powerful Mughal nobleman Shaista Khan. How do you break a crushing 3-year heavy Mughal occupation? Easy, with a one-night stealth raid. With only a handful of soldiers, Shivaji infiltrated and raided the heavily guarded Mughal camp at night. It was essentially a 17th century surgical strike. Shaista Khan barely escaped with his life, leaving a few of his fingers behind in the absolute chaos, and he promptly fled the region entirely. Now, in retaliation for that long 3-year invasion, Shivaji sacked Surat, a seriously wealthy port city of the Mughal Empire. He walked away with a staggering 10 million rupees, or 1 crore, from this single raid. To put that in perspective, that was an absolutely unimaginable fortune at the time. But what's really fascinating here is his discipline. Even in the heat of retaliation, Shivaji gave strict, value-driven orders. He went out of his way to make sure religious places weren't attacked, and he even purposely spared the home of a known charitable man in the city. And this brilliantly illustrates an escape plan that honestly feels straight out of a modern heist movie. So, a bit later on, Shivaji was actually placed under house arrest in Agra by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. To execute his master plan, Shivaji just started distributing these large gift baskets of sweets to holy men, day after day. Eventually, the guards grew completely complacent and stopped checking the baskets. Expecting exactly this, Shivaji and his son just hid right inside the baskets and were carried out, escaping right under the guards' noses. Needless to say, Aurangzeb could never capture him again. Section 3. Expansion of the Empire. A pan-Indian power. Shivaji passed away at the age of 50, but his death didn't end the Maratha dream. Not even close. Instead, it sparked a desperate, all-out war of survival against the Mughals that eventually morphed into unprecedented pan-Indian expansion. As the empire expanded rapidly, it went through a massive structural transformation. The highly centralized state of Shivaji's era decentralized under the leadership of the Peshwas, or prime ministers. We also see incredible leadership from figures like Queen Tarabai. Her brilliant military tactics literally preserved Maratha independence by aggressively invading Mughal territories. The Marathas pushed far north, going all the way to Peshawar. However, this period of rapid expansion definitely had its dark spots. Historical sources neutrally note that the Marathas' 10-year campaign in Bengal was highly controversial, inflicting severe cruelty and devastation on the common people living there. The 18th century for them was an absolute roller coaster. They actually began controlling Delhi in 1754. Now, they did suffer a disastrous defeat against the Afghans at the Battle of Panipat in 1761, but their resilience was unbelievable. They bounced right back and recaptured Delhi just 10 years later. By the latter half of the 18th century, they were literally the final ultimate hurdle for British colonial ambitions. They fought 3 grueling Anglo-Maratha wars before their power finally fell in 1818. So when you really look at it, the British effectively took India from the Marathas, not the Mughals. Section 4. Running a massive empire. The administration engine. Let's pause our timeline for a second and look under the hood of all this success. The true engine was the Ashtapradhana Mandala, Shivaji's highly organized council of 8 ministers. They covered everything from finance to intelligence to justice. And here is a stroke of absolute administrative genius. As a massive lesson in anti-corruption, Shivaji abolished the old system of giving out hereditary land grants. Instead, he paid salaries directly from the state treasury and periodically transferred his officials around. This guaranteed that local lords wouldn't accumulate enough land, money, and power to ever turn against him. To fund their massive military forces, they developed a really brilliant self-sustaining revenue model. They levied external taxes, called chauth, which was 25% of a region's revenue, and sardishmukhi, an additional 10%, from neighboring provinces. But in return, the Marathas provided serious value. They protected these provinces from other invasions and allowed them complete internal autonomy. This dynamic fueled their continual expansion while actually providing stability to the regions that paid. Militarily, their whole strategy relied heavily on physical infrastructure. As one of their finance ministers famously wrote, "Forts are the core of the state. It was due to forts that the Maratha state survived despite decades of onslaught." This expansive, super rugged network of hill, land, and coastal forts was the literal anchor of their guerrilla warfare strategy. These forts allowed the Marathas to strategically control vital trade and military routes and safely shelter their armies. And, they didn't just build forts on land. While European navies completely dominated the waters at the time, forcing Indian ships to buy naval trade passes or face outright confiscation, the Marathas established a revolutionary full-time navy of their own. Commanded by absolute legends like Kanhoji Angre, they fiercely challenged the Europeans, actively demanding passes from the Western ships instead. No way were they backing down. They successfully defied Western technological superiority with incredibly clever battle tactics and an intimate knowledge of the Western coastline. Section 5. A lasting cultural legacy. A lasting footprint. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that to conclude our explainer, we have to look way beyond the battlefields, the taxes, and the treaties. We need to examine the deep, lasting cultural footprint the Maratha Empire left on the subcontinent. A massive part of this was an incredible architectural and cultural revival led by visionary Maratha women, particularly Ahilyabai Holkar. During her remarkable 30-year reign in central India, she administered wisely and cared deeply for the common people. She actually rebuilt major temples that had been destroyed by previous rulers, like Kashi Vishwanath and Somnath. She constructed ghats and roads stretching all the way from Kedarnath in the north to Ramaswaram in the deep south. and even revitalized traditional crafts like the Maheshwar handloom industry, which amazingly still thrives to this very day. That cultural legacy extended far, far into the south, too. Down under the ruler Serfoji II in Thanjavur, a magnificent syncretic cultural hub flourished. In a really surprising leap forward, they blended Indian and Western medicine at free clinics. And get this, they even started the very first native printing press in India. They also heavily patronized the early stages of modern Carnatic music and Bharatanatyam dance. It just goes to show, the Maratha legacy was every bit as much about the advancement of arts and science as it was about warfare. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. How did the Maratha fight for Swarajya ultimately plant the seeds for India's freedom movement? By proving, against all odds, that massive, oppressive empires could be defeated and that a local people could successfully maintain and administer a vast, well-run state of their own, the Marathas ignited a permanent belief in self-rule. It was a fiery ideal that spread like wildfire and would go on to inspire generations of Indians to believe that they too could govern themselves. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. See you next time.